Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's TSPi Public Sector Series 2020 Digital Transformation Program. My name is Steve Winter, and I'm representing TSPi, serving as MC for today's virtual event. As we've all come to learn, technology is constantly evolving. Blink, just for 1 second, and you can miss an entirely new way of doing business. Nowhere is this more evident than in the world of government IT, where the last 5 years have seen cosmic shifts in the way government agencies do business, internally, with other agencies, and with their constituents. COVID-19 has put an even greater strain on agencies to support unprecedented levels of citizen services, unemployment claims, small business loans, and much more. Over the course of the next 3 hours, today's TSPi Public Sector Series will take an expansive deep dive into just that, the tools and technologies that are prevalent right now, all designed to help government agencies improve their ability to support critical missions and deliver services to the citizens of the United States. Today's program will be divided into 4 sections. We'll open with a panel on cloud migration, followed by our keynote presentation from Nicholas Chaland, Chief Software Officer of the U.S. Air Force and co-lead for the Enterprise DevSecOps Initiative with the U.S. Department of Defense. The second half of our presentation will feature a panel on application modernization, followed by our final session on DevSecOps. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. As is sometimes the case, technical challenges could well occur. We appreciate your patience if anything interrupts our delivery of this great content. Please ensure that you have our FAQs pulled up should you run into any connection issues. Second, we encourage you to submit questions throughout the morning using the chat option. After the program, we will share with you an event recap with detailed responses to any of your questions. Before we get started, I'd like to first thank our sponsors for making today's program possible. Amazon Web Services, providing on-demand cloud computing platforms and APIs to individuals, companies, and governments on a metered pay-as-you-go basis. Red Hat, one of the world's leading providers of enterprise open source solutions, including high-performing Linux, cloud container, and Kubernetes technologies. Trend Micro, a global leader in cybersecurity, helping to make the world safe for exchanging digital information. Checkmarks, a software security company that integrates automated security technologies into the software development process. And of course, our host, TSPi, a leading technology integrator that designs and implements secure IT solutions to improve efficiency, increase performance, and achieve customer success. As part of this program, we've created a vendor resource center filled with content to help you navigate your digital transformation journey. Please check that out during our spring breaks or download it throughout the course of the morning. I'd also like to thank all our federal government speakers and participants in advance for devoting their time and expertise. Your involvement is greatly appreciated. And now, let's introduce our host for this event, the founder and CEO of TSPi. This gentleman founded TSPi in 2001 with the vision of building an IT firm focused on delivering solutions that produce customer success. He leads efforts to establish the firm's business goals, growth strategy, and identification of emerging technologies and industry trends that impact their customers. Prior to TSPi, our host was instrumental in the development of web acceleration algorithms at an early-stage intelligent content delivery network startup, FastTide. He began his IT career at PSINet, a leading commercial ISP. One of his notable accomplishments at PSINet was the implementation of NASA's high-volume web hosting, including Senator John Glenn's 1998 spaceflight. It was a combination of experiences gained through these positions and the worldwide IT transformation underway due to the internet revolution that served as inspiration for him to start TSPi. So please join me in welcome TSPi's founder and CEO, Vishal Suri. Vishal, welcome. For starters, Vishal, sorry, stepped over you there. Vishal, what was the motivation for TSPi to host this program today?
Yeah, thank you for the opening comments, Steve. And I also want to thank our federal speakers, our participants, and the sponsors who've helped make this event possible. Motivation-wise, we strongly believe that progress requires partnership, and our citizens are best served when peers in the government and industry come together. And that's especially important in the rapidly evolving technology environment, challenges that we've been facing due to COVID. So an open dialogue across the federal environment leads to developing better and faster solutions. So all ideas discussed this morning, I believe, should be central to any organization focused on delivering results to the U.S. citizenry.
Got it. Well, speaking of solutions, and again, without giving away details that our experts plan to share during their sessions, can you tell us why the technologies that are represented during today's panel are so significant?
That's a good question, Steve. We're excited about each of the panels, and each offer a unique perspective on modern technology. Digital transformation requires both an understanding of the potential that new technologies offer and how government approaches investment and implementation. Specifically, we believe cloud-based technologies and DevSecOps have the potential to support fundamentally new models of service delivery.
Great. Now, are these solutions essentially one size fits all? In other words, is this technology appropriate for all government agencies, or, I don't know, is it really more applicable to a select subset of agencies?
I think I can speak on behalf of all the participants of this event that there really isn't a thing as one size fits all. I think each organization has its own unique needs. Generally speaking, initiatives like modernizing federal IT delivery, embracing modern technology solutions, and building for the cloud are common goals across the government. And from that perspective, I think the topics that we're going to be discussing today are going to be right in line.
Good stuff here, Vishal. Thanks. And now it looks like we're ready to begin. So let's start with our opening panel on cloud migration. Our moderator for cloud migration is the founder of his own communications firm and the former editor of Federal Times, a content marketing professional and former award-winning journalist who specializes in helping clients articulate their differentiated value propositions and resonate with public sector audiences. He launched Watkins Communications in 2015 to provide a variety of tailored communication and consulting services to clients in the federal marketplace, offering expertise in all varieties of content platforms, including live events, webcasts, white papers, video, social media, bylined articles, blogs, and issue briefs. He presently serves as Chief Content Officer for Governing Marketing University, a community-based collaborative platform providing training, events, career development, and community building for professionals serving in the public sector marketplace. And so we now turn over the screen to the founder of Watkins Communications, Steve Watkins.
Good morning.
At least I hope we turn over the screen. There he is.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that introduction. And I welcome my panel to join us. We have a terrific panel. Obviously, a lot of what Steve was talking about in terms of how federal agencies are advancing their missions, trying to serve citizens in more digital capacity. At the center of all of that is the cloud. And so our panel this morning to kick off is going to talk about how federal agencies are migrating to the cloud and considerations that federal agencies will need to bear in mind as they continue on that journey. And we have a terrific panel to help us kind of put that in perspective. First off, we have Bob Bond from Nist, who's a cloud computing manager. We have Jamie Baker from Amazon Web Services, senior manager for Federal Civilian. And then John Clay from Trend Micro, who is director of the Global Threat Communications piece of Trend Micro. What I'd like to do is ask each of you, and we'll go through maybe starting with Bob and then Jamie and John, if each of you could kind of take a minute and just tell us a little bit about your role with your company, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Robert Bond. I serve as the Nist Cloud Computing Program Manager. So in this role, I help to develop the technical goals of the program. We've been doing this for about 10 years now. We kicked our program off in 2010, you may recall. But right now, we have several things that we're looking at. One in general is the development of guidance around SLAs based on the standards that the ISO organization has produced. There's ISO standard 19086, which is a family of standards regarding SLAs and cloud. So that's right. That's what we're doing now. We take the standard and we try to leverage it back into the government. So.
Great. Jamie?
Hi, good morning. So my name is Jamie Baker. I'm in the Amazon Web Services Worldwide Public Sector Division. We focus on helping customers in governments around the world, state and local, as well as federal education and nonprofits. Specifically, I work in our U.S. federal practice, and I support customers in the health, science, and policy vertical. So customers like Health and Human Services, VA and military health, NASA, Department of Energy, as well as our policy, which includes like State Department, USAID, and General Services Administration.
I'm sorry, John, please, first of all, special thank you to John, who's joining us from Colorado at 6 a.m. there. But John, please tell us a little bit about your role with Trend Micro.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. I am the Global Threat Communications Director at Trend Micro. I've been with Trend Micro for 24 years in cybersecurity. And I work with our threat researchers who are out there all over the world looking at all the bad things that are happening in cybersecurity. They're monitoring the underground communities. They're looking at cloud infrastructures. They're looking at our customers' implementations, their networks, trying to just identify and understand what the malicious actors are doing all day long, every day. And then we obviously develop security solutions from the endpoint all the way to the cloud to try and help them defeat these malicious actors that are targeting their networks. So very happy to be here today and look forward to our discussion.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Our conversation is going to kind of cover four broad categories. We're going to start off talking about kind of federal cloud adoption more broadly, with kind of special emphasis on Jamie with his great perspective from Amazon. Then we're going to switch into what Nist is doing in the way of cloud standards, where we'll talk primarily with Bob. And then we'll get into a lot of the cloud security issues that I know a lot of our federal audience is very concerned with, talking mostly with John on that one. And then lastly, we'll cover a bit more on some of the cloud SLA standards that Bob was referring to earlier. So let's kick it off and talk a little bit about federal cloud adoption more broadly. Jamie, obviously AWS is a huge player in the federal cloud market. What are you seeing in terms of broad trends occurring today with federal cloud adoption, and where do you see that heading?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I was told my microphone might be a little bit weak, so I'm going to do my best to speak loudly.
You sound good right now.
Okay. So by and large, we see the majority of federal agencies going through similar kind of cloud adoption practices. Largely in the early days, and when I say that, I mean 2010 to 2014. It was focusing on those assets that were already publicly facing, right? So public-facing websites, the low-hanging fruit of being able to just take a website, get it off of an on-prem system, and get it onto a scalable platform like AWS and other cloud service providers. We see that through the last handful of years, many agencies are taking a more enterprise approach, and they're building what I like to refer to as the plumbing to get to get cloud as kind of a first-class citizen on their network. So what I mean by that is, you've got to get your networking connected. You have to make cloud look like it's physically no different than an on-premises data center would be for the actual end users. You've got to get a flexible procurement vehicle in place so that you're able to take advantage of the variable pricing models and be able to actually do chargeback to the end customers within the agency. And then you have to get governance and compliance in place, and that's largely based on what Nist has done to really make cloud have the same types of controls in place that a federal agency can take those controls, map it to their, the way they would do it traditionally with FSMA. And so there's confidence from the mission owners to be able to leverage a platform like that. And so agencies are really on some sort of part of that journey. We're seeing a lot of, enterprise mass migrations. There's traditionally some sort of defining moment coming up, like a Polo contract refresh, or just systems that are in dire need of kind of refactoring, and those are kind of pushed into one of these migration plans. And I think that that's a path, that is a model that we've seen progressing for the last few years. And I think in the future, there's going to continue to be that. But I think a lot of it is a lot of the innovation that's happening around access to tools like machine learning and advanced data analytics. These tools aren't being built to run in traditional x86 architectures. And I think that many of the folks that have been hesitant to move to the cloud now realize that this is the platform you have to be on in order to take advantage of these services. And I think that they're going to really benefit a lot and really start catching up with commercial and being able to take advantage of those types of forward-leaning technologies. So those are the kind of the primary drivers. And, I think that, every agency has a cloud strategy. It just depends on where exactly they are in that journey.
That's fascinating. And so as you said, we're seeing much more of an evolution in terms of how federal agencies are thinking about the cloud. They're thinking, we've got to do this as an enterprise, and they're approaching it that way, which makes all the sense in the world. Bob or John, would you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'd like to add that what Jamie mentioned about security is that, in general, and this, we don't try to say cloud has special security with regard to IT systems. We still say these are IT systems which need to be secured. They need to have the proper risk management associated with it, and then you determine your controls based on your risk posture. So yes, cloud, although cloud is newer for people and there are separate challenges, the overall way of looking at your infrastructure should remain the same.
Thank you. So Jamie, one last question in terms of kind of the broad overall cloud adoption. As federal agencies are kind of making this pivot or this shift toward a more enterprise approach to their cloud migration, what are some of the challenges and lessons learned that you might be able to share with us that a lot of agencies might be confronting as they do that?
Yeah, one thing that we've seen is that the agencies that have taken a more aggressive approach to cloud migrations is they don't start with, I mentioned a second ago that oftentimes agencies will say, okay, we need to have a cloud strategy. Let's start with our public-facing websites, or let's do backup and DR, right? Those are traditionally the pretty easy things to do. I found that agencies that take more aggressive approach and say, you know what, we're going to move one of our crown jewel applications in first. That builds a lot of, that really rallies the troops, and it ensures that people are taking it seriously. And it takes kind of it takes a CIO oftentimes with with some confidence that we're going to be successful in doing this. But it also, what it does is it kind of gets the groundswell going of all the groups within the IT organization to say, we need to make this successful because this application is really critical for the citizens that we're supporting with it. So it almost kind of pulls people forward. And I think one of the other things that I've seen quite a bit is agencies say, we have to have a multi-cloud approach. And I don't think that is a bad idea, right? I mean, I think there's the concept of we can't have everything in one basket. But I think the way that agencies view that is really important because oftentimes they think we have to have a multi-cloud approach from an infrastructure as a service perspective. It's very difficult to find. Cloud professionals who are, skilled in one API of a cloud service provider. It's extremely difficult to find, a cloud professional who is fluent in the APIs of all the various CSPs. They're almost like a unicorn. So I think when you think about multi-cloud, the best way to do it is to really say, we already are multi-cloud, right? We're consuming, this email service from a SaaS perspective, or we use our CRM from this other provider. But I think it's the best way to think about it is you're not going to get the true benefits of a cloud from an infrastructure and platform perspective if you boil it down to the least common denominator of all the cloud service providers. And that's really, what is your virtual machine technology? What is your storage technology? Because then it's just then you've just got kind of the bare bones of what the CSPs can really offer. So I think taking that multi-cloud approach and saying, look at it from the perspective of infrastructure, platform, and SaaS, you'll realize that by and large you have a very strong multi-cloud approach already. So that's just one thing that I've seen is don't think of it as a multi-infrastructure play. Think of it as consumption of various services that are already, cloud-based.
That's great advice, Jamie. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk more about the Nist cloud standards. And before we do that, I would like to remind the audience you can pose some questions for our panel members. The way to do that is to click on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and just type in your question and remember to hit submit. And we will try to get to as many questions as we can within our time frame. So let's switch. Jamie, you just earlier talked about the importance of standards, of governance and compliance, and obviously Nist plays a huge role in that. Bob, you're a key player in helping Nist kind of develop those standards. Tell us a little bit more about your role and how that intersects with federal cloud adoption, and maybe give us a sense of some of the key cloud-related documents that Nist has released in recent years that our federal audience should be aware of.
Okay, thank you. So in 2014, Nist published a cloud computing roadmap, technology roadmap for the United States government. And in that roadmap, it illuminates 10 requirements to get the government over into cloud quickly, safely, and securely. The first foray into standards happened with working with the ISO organization, and in that foray, we developed a taxonomy and a reference architecture on the ISO level. So that's an ISO standard, and that took several years. Also, they were able to take some of our requirements that we were working on and try to develop standards around that. So in the roadmap itself, which is SP 500-293, you can look that up. There's requirement 3, which has to do with high quality, technically competent SLAs, because at that time we realized that the SLAs were kind of, they weren't really to this quality. There was a lot of hand waving in SLAs, and if you look at some generic SLAs online, you see that they vary back and forth, and there was no real way for us to try to grab them and standardize them. So in the ISO community, we were able to develop a family of standards on SLAs. The first one, 19086-2, describes the several content areas, about a dozen SLA content areas, ranging from performance, accessibility, availability, governance, data information, how you handle your data. And there are aspects of each of those that the audience would be interested in looking at when they start to develop their cloud strategy or RFI, because in general, people have a difficult time to what are all the pieces in cloud. Well, so this document, although it won't give you an answer, it will certainly give you 12 possible pathways that you should be considering when you start looking at cloud. So that's one way of doing that. And then there's also a metric model, the 19086-2, which allows you to then say, well, if I'm going to get something, how much of it am I going to get? Because that's a basic requirement, right? In technical and business activities, if you have a requirement, you need to have some type of metric to ensure and validate that you're actually getting what you asked for. So it gives you a way to describe that. And then, of course, you work with your vendor to see how well they can work with your description and understand your specific requirements. And then just recently, February of this year, we published a Nist document on federating clouds, which also goes back to the Nist roadmap, which was requirement 5. Our document from this year is on a cloud federation reference architecture, Nist Sp 500-332. And in that document, that shows how you can create an environment of multiple clouds, akin to what Jamie was saying, but it would be slightly different, that you don't have multiple clouds just sitting and behaving by themselves individually. You can have clouds shift services and data and storage. So if you need some storage from here or you need some services from here, you can be able to combine them. And we're also working with the IEEE on developing a standard around that document. And the ISO document, the ISO folks have also decided to put a standard out on that as well. So they're just in the beginning stages of that, whereas the IEEE is about 3-4 years into their process. So.
Great, thank you, Bob. Yeah. I'd like to follow up on that last one, your special pub 500.332 that you mentioned on the Cloud Federation reference architecture. So basically what that does is it presents reference architectures and taxonomies for federated community clouds, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so can you provide some examples of perhaps what some of the challenges are that agencies have been experiencing when they deploy federated cloud community clouds, and how this new publication might help them with that?
Okay, well, I can't answer the first part of that. I can only say that if one was about to create a federated cloud, this document does not give technology details, because if we were to give technology details, that would automatically prescribe a solution. Okay, the original Nist cloud reference architecture was an actor and role based model. So it told the CIO or whoever is interested in getting it, who are the main people in the loop in a cloud environment, right? So back then we had a cloud consumer, a cloud provider, a cloud broker, a cloud carrier as well. So there were, yes. And so that described the roles of each one of these actors in cloud computing. So we took the same path in that we looked at federating clouds, getting multiple clouds to speak to each other. How would that look in an actor role-based model? So we were able to involve a few more actors. We realized that in this type of environment, where you could have clouds at different sites, while you have other things other things are involved with that. Mainly, you have an administrative domain, you have a regulatory environment, so you have to ensure that data that you can use in one place, you may not be able to use in another place, so that sets up some additional security controls. One could envision if you had an autonomous vehicle, let's say, and you were driving in Maryland. When you went over the border to Virginia or Pennsylvania, your car would have to know that it went over the border, and then it would also have to be able to get data from the local servers in that state to know what your rules and regulations that your car has to follow are. So that would be one example of how federated clouds could work. In addition, you could think of a disaster recovery scenario where you have to turn something up fast, and you don't really have all the equipment in your site. So if you were able to turn on a federation of some sort, then your friends or your other colleagues, where it's stable, you would be able to use their information and their resources easily.
Thank you. That's very helpful. You were talking about cars and driving around, which kind of reminded me, we've got a slide up for our audience on an upcoming event that you're involved in. We are kind of starting to get pressed for time, but can you tell us a little bit about this current project that you're working on relating to autonomous vehicles?
Sure. So this current project is about vehicle teleoperation, and you can see from the slide that you have a human in the loop who's operating perhaps a fleet of vehicles. So we think of vehicle teleoperation as something that is going to be part of the mobility ecosystem. We will always have this will share the road with completely autonomous vehicles, but there are different applications and different problems that we face with this. For example, what types of technologies are we really going to need? We understand we're going to need advanced networks, 5G, 6G. How much intelligence do you want to leave on the car? Do you want to have it all on the cloud? Do you want to have it all on the cloud? All on the car. And of course, that line where you draw is going to be different under different situations. So if you are in a place with low network connectivity, you want a lot of the intelligence on the car that it can operate, but it won't have to necessarily send back all the information to the main cloud. It may not need rear view video, for example. But what happens in those cases when you get low network connectivity? What are going to be the safety considerations, and how is this going to be measured? And do we have good standards around those as well? There are a lot of questions. We're going to be talking about. We have many people from industry that are going to be talking about vehicle teleoperation today and tomorrow. I'm also going to be moderating a panel on vehicle teleoperation and infrastructure, where we talk about the role of cloud, the role of AI, edge computing, security as well, along with networking.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Bob. John, let's pivot a little bit to talk more specifically about cloud security. You're hip deep in cloud security issues at Trend Micro. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the federal cloud migration journey today, and specifically the security dimensions around that, and kind of specifically how is perhaps the federal view on security evolving, and where do you see that heading in the future?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. The interesting thing about cybersecurity is the malicious actors out there don't really care where your data is. They don't care where your network is. They were going to target you. They don't care if you're in the federal government or if you're in a private sector, right? They are targeting organizations, they're targeting individuals out there. When it comes to cloud, it's kind of interesting. You think about motives, right? If you're a government agency looking to move to cloud, you got to think about what is the motive of a malicious actor to come after me, right? So the couple of things that we're seeing in the cloud specifically, one, they are looking to steal data, first and foremost, right? They want to steal data to either utilize it, extort it, or sell it in the underground market. They're looking for resources to crypto mine. So crypto mining is still a thing, and it still happens out there. Cryptocurrencies are stabilizing in value and still continuing to go up. So they're going to continue to do that action. They also, obviously, espionage is another one, big one for U.S. government, trying to steal secrets, trying to steal information that we're utilizing. And then lastly, and more concerning, is destructive attacks, and the fact that they may look to destroy some of the cloud infrastructures out there to impair what that organization is trying to do. When it comes to how they're doing it, that's the other thing that's quite interesting. A lot of things that they're doing in the normally they do in the cloud. Credential theft is huge. So as you're building your cloud infrastructure and your networks, think about the administrative accounts that are managing those activities, managing the applications. They are going to look to steal the credentials, brute force the credentials, however they can get it. They want to get access to those credentials, because once they do have the credentials of an administrator or a developer, then they are able to do a lot of things, like I mentioned before. They can drop crypto mining malware on the systems. They can drop ransomware on the systems. They can steal data, all of that. The other aspect, and this is the harder part for organizations, is misconfigurations. We see we have an application that helps with misconfigurations, and we see 290 million misconfigurations a day being found by that application across our customer networks. And that is the challenge that a lot of organizations have, especially the ones that are moving to the cloud, because it's all new, right? Technology changes all the time. You think about AWS, for example, just over the last several years, they now have 120 plus applications and services available to an AWS customer. How do you learn all of that in a very short period of time? You think about Kubernetes is pretty new. Docker is new. There's all these technologies that are coming out are all new. So organizations and the federal government have to think about, how do we train our people to understand that? And that's just understanding how to implement it and how to configure it. It's not even thinking about, well, how is it going to be secure? When we look at the new tech, what we try to do is figure out, how are the criminals going to attack it? So in a lot of our reports, you'll see attack scenarios regularly. So, in the cloud, again, they're going to attack you through credential theft. They're going to attack you through trying to look for misconfigurations. S3 buckets are huge in the news on being found, because think about an S3 bucket out of the gate, out of the default, is that it's not available to the internet and it's not accessible. Well, somebody had to probably misconfigure that S3 bucket to be open to the internet, and that's what the criminals are looking for. They are scanning using Shodan to scan the entire internet to figure out where's an open IP. Once they find an IP, what's available on that IP? Is there open ports? Are there open applications? Are there vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities are another area that they are looking for. You heard earlier about API usage. Well, everybody in the cloud and all the application vendors in the cloud are moving to APIs. Those APIs at times are not configured properly, and they are being exploited by the threat actors out there. So they're going to look at that as well. We're going to be talking about DevOps here in just a little bit, right? Well, these developers have keys to the castle, essentially, right? So, I was talking to one of our researchers the other day, and he said, I asked him, who would you target in an organization if you were a hacker? And he said immediately, developers. They have access to the best systems. They have access to the data. They're regularly updating things. And so that's another challenge from a security perspective. So a couple of things, again, misconfigurations, credentials, administrative credentials, and then APIs and the misconfigurations of those APIs we're seeing a lot of.
Thank you for that. And did I hear that correctly? You said 290 million per day misconfigurations? Yeah.
That's unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be pretty scary for any CISO out there. So what can federal agencies do about kind of addressing? I mean, you talked about probably 5 or 6 broad categories of security challenges and vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, and credential theft, crypto mining, and so forth. So what are some tips that you might have for some of our federal audience members?
Yeah, again, it's very similar to what you're doing in the previous time. So when you had your own data center, you had to secure that data center, right? So think about, especially for credential theft, first and foremost, can you harden up the administrative accounts that you're utilizing? Utilize multi-factor authentication is a huge way to bypass. So, if they were able to get access to the passwords, which again, they're doing brute forcing, they're password spraying technologies that allow them to obtain those passwords, they probably would not be able to break the multi-factor authentication process, the dual second factor process of logging into that account. So look at implementing that capability if possible for your administrative accounts, especially. Vulnerabilities, we saw just recently Zero Logon came out and with domain controllers. And so looking at patch management is going to be critical in the cloud infrastructure. Virtual patching is a technology that is very good because that can actually virtually patch the vulnerabilities until you have the time to take to test the patch from the vendor and then implement that patch out there. So a virtual patch, a network IPS or a host-based IPS solution is very good today as well there. On the crypto mining piece, obviously anti-malware, Steve talked about machine learning, artificial intelligence. Those technologies are very good now and implementing those so that they can identify the new malware that's coming onto those systems. Monitoring your cloud applications, your cloud servers, because when a crypto miner gets on there today, they still try to steal all the resources. So you'll see some degradation on your resources of those servers or those virtual machines. So take a look at that and do that monitoring of those. Extortion attacks are going to continue. They may try to steal a administrative account and then extort you for getting that account back or the data back that they steal. So again, that multi-layered security solution that you look to build, again, it really goes back to, Steve, where when you're developing your cloud and implementing your cloud, you have to think about security from day one. You have to think about, how do I secure the entire process how do I secure that entire infrastructure as I build it, right? So implementing a lot of those tools, implementing a lot of the security controls around it can help. If you're looking at public cloud, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, whatever it might be, you can look for technologies that are available there that can build security into the mix, because cloud is a shared responsibility between the cloud vendors like Amazon or Microsoft or Google and yourselves, because Amazon and Microsoft and Google aren't going to do everything. You have to secure your data, you have to secure your administrative accounts, you have to secure the systems that are running in that infrastructure.
Thank you, John. That's very helpful. Jamie or Bob, would you guys have anything to add to that in terms of what you're seeing on the security front and any tips or advice you might have for some of our federal audience members?
This is Jamie. I would say, if John just referenced security is job zero, and that's 100% true. I would a large percentage of the technologies that Amazon develops every single year are security focused. We're starting to leverage things like machine learning and building, no-cost services that will look across a customer's accounts and alert them, saying, John referenced an open S3 bucket. By default, it's locked down. You have to open it up. But we'll look across your accounts and say, hey, did you know that this is going on? And give you proactive things that we see that are potential vulnerabilities. And I think that's something that you get from the cloud that you don't really get from the traditional IT. So there's a tremendous amount of investment there. The CSPs are heavily invested in making sure that they don't have massive security breaches. The majority of the apps on your phone are all running on, the back-end systems are all running on the cloud. And you can imagine from credit card numbers to PII data, if a CSP loses that trust because of a massive security vulnerability, it's billions of dollars, right? So that they invest very heavily in it, and they build services that end customers can actually take advantage of to really help them protect against these threats that are maturing every day.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Let's jump into audience Q&A. Bob, we've already discussed some of the work you're doing with SLA standards, and we're running a little bit short on time. So I'd like to jump ahead to audience Q&A if we can. We do have a couple questions. One is directed to John, if you could. Can you please speak to some of the security challenges around Office 365?
Yeah, Office 365 is being implemented everywhere, right? And it's a great technology for organizations to improve their messaging area. But again, what the criminals are looking to do there, again, steal Office 365 account credentials. That's a big one. So they're sending phishing emails into the individuals, and it's popping up a Office 365 login account and trying to get the person to log into their account, and then that information goes straight to the criminal, right? So that's a challenge for organizations, thinking about that and training their users that when that pop-up should happen and when it shouldn't, because in most cases that pop-up only comes in when they're first logging into the account. Again, implementing two-factor authentication to get into your Office 365 account is huge. Spam and phishing are massive. Business email compromise is still a problem for organizations. So, and Microsoft does a pretty good job of the native security controls, but we still see millions and millions of threats getting through that. So I would say, look for third-party tools and third-party security tools to improve and build upon what Microsoft does in the Office 365 area. We're utilizing artificial intelligence now to look at, writing styles, for example. So if your executives are writing their emails, we'll actually build a model to show how they write their emails. And if a criminal steals the credentials of that executive and tries to write an email, they probably won't write it similarly. So we'll be able to flag that and go and say, hey, this is a suspicious email. It isn't written like the normal email that an executive did. And we'll be able to flag that through the technology. So it's pretty impressive. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, criminals are going to take advantage of Office 365 all day long.
Thank you very much, John. We've got to wrap up. If I could, we'll just kind of go around the bend with Jamie first, Bob second, and John third. Just leave us with maybe 30 seconds of final tips or advice, please.
Sure. So I think that the federal government is starting to accelerate in their use of cloud. To my point earlier, I think take a good look at don't start with the easy things. If you really want to get buy-in and you're serious about doing transformation to enable your mission in the future, start with something where there's significant buy-in. That's really going to get the agency kind of rowing the boat in the same direction, and will accelerate your cloud adoption.
Hi. Yes, I wanted to mention that cloud standards have been able to help people determine what a cloud is, how to talk about it, have a common vocabulary, and of course, when you're dealing with your cloud provider, you should have a common vocabulary so you both know what you're talking about at the time. Getting those definitions squared away, using definitions from standards organizations. ISO has a standard on that. At the end of the day, before we leave, I will put in links to some ISO standards that people might want to use on the reference architecture, on the vocabulary, and the SLAs. And they're these are freely available, so you don't have to pay a fee to get those standards.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for having us today. I would just say, again, think about security from the beginning. Educate your employees who are managing and developing the cloud for your organization. And then think about how the criminals are going to target you. Talk to your security vendors. Make sure they have a secure cloud platform, not just specific products, but a platform that can look at the entire cloud infrastructure and how it can secure that. So good luck out there, and look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks so much, Jamie, Bob, John. Appreciate all your views and perspectives. This was a terrific discussion. Steve Winter, will transition back to you and have a short break. But thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Terrific panel, folks. Thanks so much for everybody's insights. That was great. And so on behalf of TSPi, let's thank the following companies for their support: Amazon Web Services, Red Hat, Trend Micro, Checkmarks, and of course, TSPi.